Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I will be breaking down all the information that we heard regarding all things flight. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Cannot do this without you guys, so thank you so much for the support. It is truly appreciated. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a Star Citizen Live that sat down and spoke to developers responsible for how ships fly and perform. Now this show went deep into all things ships, flight experience, quantum travel, atmospheric flight, pretty much everything related to how we fly our vehicles, so settle in as there is a lot of good stuff to run through. The first question was regarding heavy fighters and what their intended purpose is. Now with this answer I saw a lot of misinterpretation as to what was said here, so I'm going to break this down as accurately as possible. Firstly, heavy fighters are to be fighters with lower maneuverability to that of, say, a light or medium fighter, but with increased durability and firepower. Now, they have recently retuned all the heavy fighters to perform more in the roles where they intend them for, but they are aware that the heavy fighter class is currently underperforming. But they feel that it's not necessarily the heavy fighter tunings that's the issue, and it's more about how they relate to other classes. And so they will be focusing on tuning the other classes first, like light fighters, medium fighters, before doing anything to the heavy fighters again, but of course they will change it if necessary. So to clear up this confusion, they are not saying that heavy fighters are perfect, and that they will never change. They are saying that they don't think the issue lies with how the heavy fighters perform and are tuned, and are more the tunings of the other ship classes and how they relate to heavy fighters. So they will be looking more into tuning the other classes of ships first, before changing anything on the heavy fighters in the near term, and once they have done that, then they will reevaluate and adjust the heavies if needed. Now, balancing for ships is clearly not as black and white as tuning one class. It is how everything connects together, be that light, medium, heavy, multi-crew, capital ships. They all need to make sense to one another. And if you make one tweak on one of them, it can affect everything else. There will also be a huge impact to all ships, especially heavy fighters, when features like Maelstrom, their physical damage system that is currently in the works, and ship armor. Once those systems come in, for example, heavy fighters will have the weaponry that can penetrate through larger ship armor versus that of a medium or light fighter, which will give much more of an intended purpose to using a heavy when larger ships are your opponents. And also with the new upcoming flight model changes, they feel that heavy fighters right now are a little too tanky than they should be, so they will be evaluating whether that needs to change or not. But again, they'll determine it, they'll make the change, they'll try it out, they will get our feedback and adjust accordingly. Now, speaking of balance, something was mentioned that I actually fully agree with, which is Star Citizen doesn't need to be perfectly balanced, which is due to the idea of removing this meta and how each ship, all the items on those ships, and all players are very different. Now, balance is important, of course, there needs to be balance across the board, but with how nuanced Star Citizen is and how player ability and skill is to be much more impactful, balancing can only do so much before it artificially impacts skill and imposes artificial restrictions. For example, many ships have their intended role, which means they will excel in that particular area, but not in other areas. Now, that's not to say that a player can't tune or customize that ship to suit their needs and abilities, but there are many variables impacting everything, which makes the idea of a full stat balance pretty much impossible. Now, as I say, that's not to say that things won't be balanced. Eventually there won't be overperforming or underperforming ships. It's more to do with how players use them and what they do with them that matters most, and how good a player is. Now, two players could own the same factory default ship, but fly them in completely different ways, or tune them in different ways. One of those ships might be ideal for taking on a certain type of fighter, but not a larger ship, and vice versa, and so on. So yeah, I get what they're saying here. It's a difficult concept to grasp, but I am glad that they said it, as it does make sense. Next question, will the F8 ever become a mobility monster again? Now, they say that the F8 has a lot of firepower and a lot of thrust, and they will adjust it accordingly as outlined in the first answer. They say that with this new flight model, they have so many more tools to help adjust and balance things in all different areas. Basically, there will be many more variables that they can play with to really push each ship, not just the F8, but each ship into its own feel and offer many pros and cons. And the F8 will continue to be updated as any other ship as they progress through the next stage of flight. Now, something that was mentioned, which I have been pretty much saying for a long while now, is a specific ship might be your favourite due to how it looks or its stats on paper, but that might not actually suit your ability, skill set, or preference. Each individual player's ability will vary, and suit or complement certain ships and not others. Now, this doesn't mean that a ship is better or worse, it just means that that specific ship might not be where your skills excel. However, jumping into a different ship in that same category might better suit your skill set or your ability to maneuver differently. And this is going to become more and more apparent as these flight model changes roll out, and we get more systems like engineering, flight blades, maelstrom, armor, and whatever else. And in my opinion, is a good thing. That's not to say that you won't be able to take a specific ship that you love and that is suited to a certain role and then tweak it or customize it to suit your ability and use case. There will be many options to do that, especially with all of the IFCS toggles that we will speak about in a minute. But some ships will naturally suit you and your flight preferences and abilities, and others just won't. And trying every ship before you decide on what ship you want to use is definitely worth doing, so make sure you're hopping into Arena Commander just to kind of get to grips with how each ship flies, or even rent them in the PU. That's probably a more thorough test. But of course, practicing, gaining experience, all this will help, and what we have now with the Alpha is not there right now to spend too much time on, as so much will change. Certainly wait for the new flight model before thoroughly practicing and deciding on what ship to use forever, and of course I'm sure some practicing now will translate over to the finished product as such, but what we are flying now will be night and day different to when this new flight model comes in. Anyway, the next question is about the quantum travel experience. Now, with this new flight model, there are three parts to it. We have the first one being quantum travel experience, we have the space flight model, or 6 degrees of freedom model, and then we have control surfaces, which is the atmospheric flight model. All of these have been changed and expanded on, but for quantum travel specifically, it has changed and evolved since we saw it at CitizenCon, which was probably about 2 years ago. Now, quantum boosting is said to be used in place of nav mode, which will no longer be a thing. Nav mode is going away, and instead we will have 3 different speeds. We've got SEM speed for combat or role-specific speeds like your mining or salvaging speeds, quantum travel for traveling between planets, and then quantum boosting, which they say, again, these numbers are, I'm sure, just plucked out of the air, but within a 300 kilometer bubble. Now, originally, quantum boosting was to be up to 30 kilometers. It sounds like it's going to be extended quite a bit, so traveling from a planet to a moon in the same area will be used with quantum boosting. So when you engage your quantum drive, this will then allow you to quantum boost to whatever range they decide upon. Again, it's just an example that they gave, but let's say you can quantum boost up to 300 kilometers in any direction, allowing us to travel greater distances at greater speeds than what we have now, meaning navigation should be more fluid and less shifting between modes. Hopefully this will have some good actual exploration mechanics attached to it as well. Now, for thrusters and space flight, they will be building on what we already have, which will be non-spherical velocity space, meaning your max speeds forwards will always be greater than that flying sideways or backwards, which is to counter the issues like backstrafing or kiting, and this is to make the fights feel more visceral, closer, and engaging, and make spaceflight more like Star Wars than, say, The Expanse, which has always been Chris Roberts' vision. Obviously, it moves much further away from simulation to arcade, but after playing Hellion a lot of years back, realistic spaceflight would just be a brain ache anyway. Now, Jerk, which is basically the change of acceleration, will now have a slower ramp-up speed, so you won't go from 0 to 9 Gs instantly. It'll ramp up over a short period of time for fighters, making rotations feel smoother. That's something we just have to feel to see if it feels right or not. And as mentioned, there will be a lot of IFCS customization. Now, IFCS, being the Intelligent Flight Control System, is essentially all of your ship's safeties and automations working to help keep your ship as stable as possible. Think of it like traction control or ABS for cars. We will be able to toggle a lot more of these safety options on or off depending on what we want. Now, they didn't outline all the different variations. We currently have a couple, being things like gravity stabilization or compensation. It sounds like there's going to be quite a lot of other options. And they say that when your IFCS core system is turned off, your ship will fly more like Kerbal Space Program. So your ship won't recover as it does with the system on. For example, if you hit into something, your ship won't automatically recover its vector if you turn it off. And when in atmosphere, the fly-by-wire won't be on when the IFCS core is turned off, meaning that you can have direct control of your control surfaces. So essentially, it gives you more true control over your ship's behaviors, but makes it more harder to control as you have to learn to compensate and control everything for yourself. Now, this to me sounds like it is exactly what we should have in-game. The ability to have an easy-to-learn system, keeping your safeties on like in a car, controlling and stabilizing most systems so that new players can get to grips with it easily, but offering options to turn these systems off so that you can practice restricting nothing artificially, allowing you to get really good, so that you can really punch it, provided you have the skill and experience to control that. Now, this will then directly make just flight skill very important. For combat, for racing, for example, allowing those who really want to spend the time learning their ship's abilities with no restrictions to perform optimally and push it to its limits, which, for me, sounds great. Each ship will handle differently as well, so you'll certainly find the one that you love, hone your skills with that ship, but that might not translate over to the other ships. You will have to learn those ships as well. Very happy to hear that. Now, talking of speeds, they are removing artificial top speeds, which doesn't mean unrestricted speeds. With it being a game the way that it's built, they still need restricted speeds, but the top speed of a ship is going to be what a ship's thrusters can achieve in a fixed amount of time. And then increasing the amount of engineering pips to thrusters, for example, will give you more top speed. And then further ahead, when Maelstrom rolls out, this will also mean that if you were to remove items from your ship, like even just firing a missile, or taking a component or a weapon off, or jettisoning your cargo, your ship will then be lighter, and thus you can go faster. Now, this opens up a lot of potential for really fine-tuning and customizing your ship for very specific use cases, especially racing. Stripping back your ship's systems and items just to the necessity or the core items that is required, providing you with better speeds or handling. And I can just see racing teams having super customized vehicles purely for racing, giving them the best handling, the best speeds. Now, for atmospheric flight and control surfaces, they have a fully licensed pilot working on the control surfaces. At the time of this show, which was a couple of weeks back, they say they have dialed in how ships fly based on the angles of the control surfaces, allowing gliding even if your ship has no engines or power. Now, one thing that this will be very beneficial for is, for example, getting attacked by distortion weapons. I'm sure we've all been attacked by distortion weapons where your ship shuts down and you just tumble and fall out of the sky and then splat on the ground and blow up. With this new system, you will be able to glide your ship using control surfaces and perform an emergency landing. Not to mention how this will certainly help with things like stealth. If you're approaching a target, being able to shut off certain systems to reduce your overall signatures but still maintain flight will be great. Now, talking further about the quantum travel experience, they feel it is very clunky at the moment, which is true. So as said, nav mode will be completely ripped out. You won't need to toggle between nav mode and SEM. And as it is planned right now, it can change. He does say that if they play it and it doesn't feel good, they will change it again, which is a very important statement. Yes, it means more time in the works, but they won't leave it if it's crap. With the goal, they say, is to make traversing through the verse as fluid as possible. So the plan is, if you have your quantum drive powered on, you will be able to engage in quantum travel when you want. You then look at the location, hold the button down, and off you go. So essentially as it is now, but you won't need to switch between different modes. So as long as your drive is powered on, you can make a jump. Now, most of this stuff, he says, is in and working in Squadron 42. He just currently needs to rip out the nav mode from Squadron, and they won't enable it into the PU until things are all in place, including ship tunings, which I will get to their current progress in a second. For a few of the questions that were asked and answered, the first one is, capital ships in atmosphere, pointing down at the ground and just shooting. What the hell, it looks ridiculous. Now, they say that nobody wants ships just capable of pointing at the ground and shooting. The new flight model will fix this. They can't say for sure whether it'll be the first rollout or of the new flight model or later on, but it is wanted desperately by them and Chris Roberts. Thruster efficiency curves will stop this from happening, and when you are in atmosphere landed, you will also have an indicator on the HUD that will tell you what your thrust-to-weight ratio is against the planet's gravity. And if that ratio is below 1.0, you will not be able to take off, and this will also take into account your cargo, so you are basically overloaded. You'll need to find a way to lighten your ship. You could boost, which is more of a temporary thing, so hopefully it'll get you out of the thick of the atmosphere. But you could also use things like the SRV. That is one of the purposes of the SRV, is to help overburdened ships in atmosphere get out of atmosphere. VTOLs will allow ships to hover, but you won't be able to just simply stop, sit in atmosphere, and then point down and shoot. That will be gone. Now this, I cannot wait for. It is so painful seeing ships doing this, let alone seeing a ship pointing at you and then shooting. Now, in terms of timelines, they do say it's not too far off from coming in, and they are very keen to bring this in as soon as possible, but there is still stuff that is required to be done before it can. Now, the spaceflight model is done. The aerodynamic stuff is about 50% done, as the fly-by-wire is not yet complete, and for control surfaces, all that remains for this to then be rolled out to the PU is to get the AI capable of using it, which they say is quite complex, but they are confident that they can solve this in the next couple of weeks, which, as I say, this was about 2 weeks ago, this show. So hopefully by now, or soon, they will have that resolved. And then they say it's just finishing off the quantum travel experience, but I don't think they mentioned how far along they are with that. So quite a bit to do, but it doesn't sound like this stuff is taking too long, and they may need to get it into a tech preview first, for example, which gets it in our hands, but not necessarily into the PU straight away. But yeah, I'm expecting it this year, personally. Next question, do you plan to make industrial ship turrets a viable deterrent? And they say they are still working on the general turret experience and dialing in how powerful they should be. There were a few buffs to ammo and regen rates for them recently, but right now they are lacking effective medium-range weaponry. Now, they do have a plan for this. One plan will be flak, but that's not ready yet. But one aspect of Star Citizen's damage model, when Maelstrom, armor, ammo count, and engineering comes in, smaller weapons like size 1 and 2, maybe even size 3, I don't know specifically, won't be able to penetrate larger ship hulls or even armor. That's not to say that fighters can't be an effective tool against larger ships. Targeting turrets or defenses or just being a nuisance, of course, will be useful, but smaller fighters will not be able to take out larger ships because their bullets or their ammunition is not strong enough to penetrate through. Now, this is how the alpha that we have now versus, let's say, a 1.0 released version will be night and day different, especially in these areas. There is so much to come with these new systems, which will obviously come before 1.0 because we'll need to test them. But yeah, what we have now for flight, for combat, it sounds like it'll be quite the contrast. Next question is, will weather impact the ship's ability to fly? And they say, yes, this is already in for 4.2. Larger ships feel it less than smaller ships, but the effects are in for 4.2 already. Also, it's worth pointing out that with 4.2 bringing the very first version of rain and lightning and storms, it is safe to say that weather will evolve massively from 4.2 onwards, and that will also include the many ways that it can impact and affect your ship's flight and systems. Next question is about missiles and torpedoes. Are you happy with how they are performing? And they say for the targeting system, they're quite happy. Torpedo safeties to avoid close combat is now in place. and currently you have to be a certain distance from your enemy for your missile or torpedo to arm. But that is not what they want. They want you to be able to fire and have it arm the moment it's launched. And if you get too close, then that's on you. And then the final question is basically ground vehicles suck? Question mark. Now they say there is a lot they want to do with ground vehicles, and they want to give more purpose as well to ground vehicles, giving more reason to use them. Now that we have weather, that is going to be one big cause for it, cause for ground vehicles. Also, they want ground vehicle throttle control, but it's just none of it is a priority at this time. So one day, but not anytime soon, which is a shame, of course, but I get it. The flight model Squadron 42, that's the priority. Engineering, getting everything flight sorted first makes sense. But I really can't wait for ground vehicles to just feel real and one day get to two-wheeled vehicles as well, like the Rangers. That would be nice. Anyway, that was StarCitizen Live talking about all things flight and all the changes to come near-term and longer-term. For me, the flight changes just cannot come soon enough. I have no desire to practice or train with what we currently have, or learn the stats, the specs, the numbers of each ship, components, weapons, flight. It's just, for me, it feels a bit like a waste of time, as all of these changes will practically rewrite all of that. When that comes in, then sure, I will spend a lot of time practicing. But right now, I'm just desperately waiting to see this stuff come in so that we can get to grips with it, feel how it plays, and hopefully it is everything that we need and we don't need to change it anymore. But that said, I have no idea whether this stuff is what we need or not until it is in our hands and we are trying it. But from what it sounds like, it is much better than what we have, especially atmospheric flight. Making it feel more like a simulation will be a dream in Star Citizen, especially now we can fly through weather and burst up beyond the clouds. That is quite an experience. Plus, giving us the option to toggle IFCS safeties will really open up a lot of potential for true skill to flourish versus everything being controlled and artificially restricted, which is necessary, but not for those who have the abilities. Anyway, it is time for me to go. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. I stream 3 days a week here on YouTube and over at twitch.tv/SuperMacBrother. You're all more than welcome if you want to come and hang out and join in. Or if you have any questions, do check out my camping channel if that is of interest to you. Quite the contrast to Star Citizen. I'll link that below. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind. Does the channel a big favour. And tick that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members for all of your support. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.